My name is Noelle, 35 years old, and until last month I thought my marriage was perfect. Thomas and I celebrated 8 years together this spring. He was a successful financial consultant. I edited children's books, and my twin sister Samantha flew international flights as a commercial pilot. I never imagined that a single phone call would reveal how dangerous blind trust can be. Before I share how my world collapsed in seconds, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to join others who've discovered that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know least. My love story with Thomas began like many others, with a chance meeting at my college roommate's wedding. He was the best man, tall with kind blue eyes and a disarming smile that made me forget the speech I'd prepared as maid of honor. After the reception, we exchanged numbers, and within a week he called to ask me on our first date. "I know this little jazz club in Manhattan," he said. "The owner is a family friend. Would you like to go this Friday?" That first date still plays in my mind like a favorite movie scene. The club was intimate, tucked away in a basement with exposed brick walls and soft lighting. Thomas knew everyone there, introducing me with pride, his hand gently resting on the small of my back. We talked until the musicians packed up their instruments, and the bartender gave us the gentle signal that it was time to close. "You're different," I told him as we walked to the subway. "Most guys I date spend the whole night either talking about themselves or checking their phones." "I just want to know everything about you," he replied, his eyes locked on mine. "The phone can wait." Our courtship was deliberate and thoughtful. Thomas remembered every detail I shared, from my favorite flowers, peonies, to my childhood dream of writing a book series about a time-traveling librarian. For my birthday, 6 months after we met, he gifted me a first edition of my favorite childhood novel with a handwritten note tucking inside, promising to support my dreams whatever they might be. 2 years later, he proposed at that same jazz club, getting down on one knee during a song the band had composed especially for the occasion. I said yes, through happy tears, surrounded by strangers who quickly became our cheerleaders for the night, sending champagne to our table and offering toasts to our future. We married in a vineyard in Napa Valley, the fall colors creating a natural cathedral of amber and crimson. Samantha was my maid of honor, stunning in a midnight blue dress that complemented her pilot's confidence. Thomas's eyes welled with tears when I walked down the aisle, and I remember thinking I had never felt so certain about anything in my life. After honeymooning in Greece, we settled into our life together in Boston, buying a charming Victorian home in a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and community garden plots. We spent weekends refinishing hardwood floors, painting walls, and transforming the space into our sanctuary. Thomas insisted on creating a home office for me, converting the sunroom into a bright workspace overlooking our small backyard. "You need a proper place to create," he said, installing bookshelves that reached to the ceiling. Our life fell into comfortable rhythms. Thomas rose early, his consulting work demanding but rewarding. I joined a prestigious publishing house as an editor for their children's division, nurturing authors and illustrators as they brought magical worlds to life. On Sundays, we established a tradition of brunch at a local cafe, followed by walks along the Charles River. Friday nights were reserved for movies, alternating between his preference for historical dramas and my love of psychological thrillers. We built a network of friends, hosting dinner parties where Thomas would show off his culinary skills, perfected in cooking classes he'd taken as a surprise for me. "My parents never had friends over," he explained. "I want our home to be full of laughter and good conversation." As Thomas's reputation in the financial world grew, so did his responsibilities. His consulting firm began sending him on business trips first to New York and Chicago, then occasionally to London and Frankfurt. I missed him when he traveled, but technology kept us connected with nightly FaceTime calls where he would give me virtual tours of his hotel rooms and share amusing stories about his colleagues. Samantha's career also flourished. After years of training and working regional routes, she achieved her dream of becoming an international pilot for a major airline frequently flying transatlantic routes. Though we were identical twins, our lives had taken such different trajectories. While I built a stable home life, she explored the world, sending me photos from Paris, Rome, and Tokyo. Despite the distance, our bond remained unbreakable with marathon phone calls whenever our schedules aligned. "How does Thomas handle your sister being so identical to you?" our friends would sometimes joke. "Has he ever mixed you up?" "Never," I'd laugh. "He says he'd know me anywhere, even in a crowded room of lookalikes." This was our life for 8 beautiful years. But recently, subtle shifts occurred in our marriage so gradual, I barely noticed them. Thomas's business trips became more frequent. He started receiving phone calls that he would take in another room. A new cologne appeared on his dresser, one I hadn't selected for him. Small changes that in isolation meant nothing but together formed a pattern I was too trusting to see. I never imagined that my perfect husband, the man who remembered the anniversary of our first date and still left love notes in my lunch bag, could be living a double life. That the foundation of trust I had built my life upon was as solid as a sand castle at high tide. How wrong I was. It was a Wednesday evening like any other. Outside, autumn leaves swirled across our front lawn as I stirred a pot of butternut squash soup, Thomas's favorite. He was upstairs in his office on a video call with clients, or so I thought. The house smelled of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, and I had just uncorked a bottle of Pinot Noir to breathe when my phone rang. Samantha's name flashed on the screen, unexpected, since she was supposed to be in the middle of a transatlantic flight schedule. Wiping my hands on a dish towel, I answered. "Sam, I thought you were flying today." "I am," she said, her voice tense in a way that immediately set off warning bells in my mind. Background noise hummed behind her words, the distinctive sounds of an airport terminal. "I am at Charles de Gaulle, Paris. Boarding is almost complete, but I need to ask you something strange. Your husband, is he home right now?" The question was so odd that I laughed. "Yes, he's sitting in the living room working on his laptop." There was a long pause, and when Samantha spoke again, her voice dropped to a whisper. "That can't be true, because I'm watching him with another woman right now. They just boarded my flight to Paris." My hand froze on the wooden spoon I'd been holding. The soup began to bubble over, but I couldn't move. "What?" "That's impossible. He's upstairs on a work call. He has meetings in Chicago tomorrow." "Noelle," Samantha said firmly, "I am looking at Thomas right now. He's in business class seat 4A. There's a woman with him. Blonde, maybe late 20s. They look intimate." My mind scrambled for logical explanations. "It must be someone who looks like him. You know how people can have doppelgangers." "I've known him for 10 years, Noelle. It's Thomas. He's wearing that navy blazer with the elbow patches I helped you pick out for his birthday, and his burgundy leather messenger bag is in the overhead bin. I can see his initials from here." Just then I heard the door open behind me. My body went cold, fingers tightening around my phone as I slowly turned around, expecting to see Thomas standing there proving my sister wrong. But the kitchen doorway remained empty. The sound had come from upstairs, Thomas's office door opening. "He's walking down the aisle now." Samantha continued, urgency in her voice. "He just helped her put her bag in the overhead compartment. They're holding hands, Noelle. And, oh God." "What?" I barely recognized my own voice. "He just kissed her." not a friendly peck. I'm so sorry, but there's no mistaking this. Footsteps on the stairs. I quickly pressed the phone to my chest, muting it as Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face slightly flushed. "Something smells amazing," he said, approaching to kiss my cheek. He was wearing sweatpants and a Harvard t-shirt, not a navy blazer. His hair was tousled as if he'd been running his hands through it while concentrating a habit I'd always found endearing. "Just soup?" I managed my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake occurring inside me. "How was your call?" "Productive. Listen, I need to tell you something." He leaned against the counter looking apologetic. "Johnson moved up the Chicago meeting. I need to fly out tonight instead of tomorrow morning. I'm sorry for the last-minute change." The lie flowed so effortlessly from his lips that for a moment I questioned my sister's sighting. This man standing before me, casual and relaxed in our kitchen, couldn't possibly be boarding a plane to Paris at this exact moment. "Tonight? That's so sudden." I stirred the soup mechanically, buying time as my brain struggled to process what was happening. "I know. Corporate clients, right?" Thomas sighed, looking genuinely frustrated. "I already booked a red-eye. I need to pack quickly and head to the airport in about an hour. Will you be okay on your own for a few days?" The Oscar-worthy performance continued as he outlined his fabricated itinerary, mentioning specific meetings with clients I'd heard him reference before, promising to call when he landed in Chicago, asking if I needed anything before he left. Meanwhile, the soup burned on the stove forgotten as I maintained my own facade of normalcy. Inside, nausea rose like a tide. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the counter to steady them. The kitchen lights seemed suddenly too bright, the room narrowing to a tunnel with Thomas at the end, his familiar face now alien and unrecognizable. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked, finally noticing my pallor. "You look a little pale." "Just tired." I lied, now an actress in our shared performance. "Go pack. I'll finish dinner." He kissed my forehead before heading back upstairs. As soon as he was gone, I retrieved my phone. "He's here," I whispered to Samantha. "In our kitchen, wearing different clothes. He just told me he has to fly to Chicago tonight for meetings." "That's impossible," she replied, confusion evident in her voice. "Unless... Wait, the man is settling into his seat now. Let me get closer." I heard muffled conversation, then Samantha returned. I introduced myself as the flight attendant to get a better look. "Noelle, it's definitely Thomas. 100%. He's with a woman named Audrey. They're drinking champagne and looking at Paris apartment listings on an iPad." My world tilted on its axis. "This can't be happening. He's upstairs packing right now, Sam." "I don't know what to tell you, but he's here on my flight. We're about to take off for Paris. 8-hour flight. I'll try to get more information and call you when we land." After hanging up, I stood motionless in the kitchen, listening to Thomas move around upstairs, the familiar sounds of our life continuing as if nothing had shattered. The implications were too enormous to grasp. Either my sister was mistaken, which seemed impossible given her certainty, or there was an explanation so outlandish I couldn't yet conceive of it. An hour later, I watched Thomas leave with an overnight bag, kissing me goodbye with promises to call when he landed in Chicago. I nodded and smiled, the perfect supportive wife, sending her hard-working husband on yet another business trip. That night, I lay awake beside the man I'd married, listening to his breathing, studying his familiar profile in the darkness. When he left the next morning with another kiss and another lie, I remained in bed staring at the ceiling, planning my next move. The ground beneath my marriage had just opened up, revealing a chasm so deep I couldn't see the bottom. and I had no idea who the man I'd been sleeping beside truly was. Once Thomas left for his fictional Chicago trip, the house felt different, tainted by deception. I moved through the rooms like a detective seeing our shared space with new eyes. 8 years of marriage surrounded me in photographs, mementos, and shared possessions. How much of it had been real? I began my investigation in Thomas's home office, a space I'd always respected as his domain. The desk was meticulously organized as always. His leather planner sat centered on the blotter, and I flipped it open, finding the current week marked with Chicago meetings exactly as he'd told me. Previous weeks showed similar business trips, all to domestic locations, never Paris. Opening his desk drawers revealed nothing unusual at first: office supplies, chargers, business cards. But in the back of the bottom drawer I found a hollowed-out business book, The Art of Negotiation. Inside was a second phone, sleek and black, a model I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I turned it on. The lock screen appeared requesting a password. I tried our anniversary, his birthday, combinations of meaningful numbers in our relationship. Nothing worked. Then on a hunch, I tried a date that had always confused me when Thomas had insisted on celebrating the 6-month anniversary of our first meeting, though the date seemed off by several weeks. The phone unlocked. What I found sent me sinking into his office chair. Messages between Thomas and someone named Audrey spanning 2 years. I scrolled backward through time, watching their relationship unfold in reverse, from intimate exchanges to their first tentative messages. There were photos of Audrey, a stunning blonde woman who appeared to be in her late 20s. Pictures of them together in Paris, Rome, Barcelona, places Thomas had never mentioned visiting. In one photo, they stood in front of the Eiffel Tower, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The timestamp matched a week when he'd supposedly been at a financial conference in Denver. The messages revealed a parallel life. Missing you terribly, ma chérie. 3 more weeks until I can escape to Paris. The apartment viewing is confirmed for next Tuesday. I can't wait to have a place that's truly ours. My meeting with the divorce lawyer went well. Just need to figure out the timing. It's complicated with the assets. Divorce lawyer. The words swam before my eyes. I continued searching the house methodically, finding more evidence of Thomas's deception. In his closet, behind rows of suits, was a small locked safe I'd never noticed. The combination was the same date as the phone password. Inside, a separate passport with multiple European entry stamps on dates when he was supposedly in Chicago, New York, or Seattle. A velvet jewelry box containing diamond earrings with the receipt still inside, purchased last month at a price that made my stomach clench. Not for me. Never for me. In the master bathroom behind his collection of aftershaves, I found another cologne, expensive and French. The same scent I'd noticed on him recently and had assumed he'd purchased for himself. The most damning evidence came from his file cabinet. A folder labeled Property Investments contained a lease agreement for an apartment in Paris's 16th arrondissement, dated 6 months earlier. Thomas was listed as the tenant with a 2-year commitment. The monthly rent was staggering, more than our mortgage payment. Another folder held statements from a credit card I knew nothing about. The purchases told the story of another relationship: dinners at Parisian restaurants, jewelry stores, women's clothing boutiques, hotel charges in various European cities, all on dates when Thomas was supposedly working domestically. While examining these documents, my phone rang. Samantha was calling from Paris. "We landed. He's definitely still here," she said without preamble. They went through customs together, very cozy. I followed them discreetly. They took a taxi to an apartment building near the Eiffel Tower. Upscale neighborhood. 16th arrondissement, I asked dully. There was a pause. "How did you know that?" I found the lease agreement. Sam, he's been living a double life. For years. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. What are you going to do? First, I need to know everything. Can you keep an eye on them when possible, without compromising your job, of course? I have 3 days in Paris before my return flight. Consider me your personal private investigator. After hanging up, I called Thomas's office using the excuse that I needed to send him important documents for his meetings. Thomas Wilson. He's not in the office this week. His assistant replied cheerfully. He's taking 2 weeks of personal vacation time. First time he's used vacation days in ages. Did he forget to tell you 2 weeks? Not the 3 days he'd mentioned for the Chicago trip. I thanked her and hung up, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Next, I contacted several mutual friends, casually mentioning Thomas's Chicago trip and listening to their responses. 2 of them seemed genuinely unaware that Thomas traveled for work at all. Another, James, hesitated before saying, "Chicago again. I thought he just got back from there." "He did," I said carefully. "He goes there often for work." Another pause. "Right. Work. Of course." By evening, I had a clearer picture of Thomas's deception, but many questions remained. How deep did this go? How long had he been planning to leave me? And most importantly, how had I been so completely fooled? The next morning, I contacted a private investigator, recommended by a fellow editor who'd gone through a difficult divorce. Linda Peters arrived at my house 2 hours later, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a laptop filled with resources. "I need to know everything," I told her, spreading the evidence I'd gathered across the dining room table. "Financial records, other properties, how long this has been going on, whether there have been other women. Everything." Linda nodded, taking photos of the documents. "You've made a good start. I'll dig deeper, especially into the financial aspects. Men like your husband, they always leave a paper trail. They think they're too smart to get caught." Over the next few days, Samantha provided regular updates from Paris. Thomas and Audrey visited real estate offices, dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, and spent an afternoon at a private jewelry store appointment. "He bought something," Samantha reported. "A small box. Looked like a ring." Meanwhile, Linda's investigation revealed the full extent of Thomas's deception. He had offshore accounts I knew nothing about, containing significant portions of our joint savings. He owned partial interest in 3 European properties. There was evidence of regular money transfers to an account in Audrey's name over the past 18 months. Most shocking was the discovery that Thomas had a gambling problem he'd hidden throughout our marriage, with significant debts at various times that he'd covered by moving money between accounts. The financial web was complex and clearly designed to hide assets from me. Linda also found emails where Thomas discussed our marriage with Audrey. "Noelle suspects nothing. She's too absorbed in her books and editing to notice my absences. The divorce will be simple once I've moved enough assets. She'll get the Boston house, which should keep her happy and quiet. I never meant for our marriage to last this long. It was comfortable until I met you. Now I know what real passion feels like." Each revelation was a fresh wound. The man I'd built my life with, who I'd trusted completely, had been systematically betraying me while planning his exit. Not just with his body, but with his heart, his future plans, and our finances. I had 6 more days until Thomas was due to return from his Chicago trip. 6 days to process this information and decide how to respond. 6 days to mourn the death of my marriage and the life I thought I had. The evidence Linda uncovered painted a devastating picture of Thomas's betrayal. The scope of his deception wasn't limited to just the affair with Audrey, but extended to financial manipulation that threatened my future security. Armed with this knowledge, I needed professional guidance to protect myself. Alexandra Winters came highly recommended as a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial deception and infidelity. Her office overlooked Boston Harbor, sleek and impersonal with awards lining the walls. Alexandra herself was sharp-featured and direct, with a reputation for being ruthless in court. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state," she explained after reviewing my evidence. "That means marital property isn't necessarily split 50-50, but rather what the court deems fair. Thomas's infidelity and financial deception will significantly impact how assets are divided." She tapped her pen on the documents I'd provided. "These offshore accounts, the properties purchased during your marriage, the diverted funds, all of this is marital property regardless of whose name is on it. His attempts to hide assets will not be viewed favorably by the court." "What should I do before he returns?" I asked. "Document everything. Continue working with your PI. We'll need to file emergency motions to freeze accounts and prevent further movement of assets. And I strongly recommend securing your personal items and any separate property you brought into the marriage." For the next several days, I followed a methodical plan. First, I transferred my portion of our joint accounts to protected individual accounts Alexandra had helped me establish. This wasn't about taking what wasn't mine, but rather preventing Thomas from emptying our shared resources before legal proceedings began. With Alexandra's guidance, I changed the locks on our house, which was legally permissible given the evidence of Thomas's extended absence and deception. I placed fraud alerts on all credit accounts and gathered important documents including marriage certificates, property deeds, tax returns, and insurance policies. I met with our financial advisor claiming I wanted to surprise Thomas with a retirement planning session. The advisor's expression when I asked specific questions about accounts revealed that he knew more about our finances than I did. He awkwardly explained investment choices Thomas had made without my knowledge, including risky options that had lost significant value. "Thomas said you preferred to let him handle the details," the advisor said, avoiding my eyes. "Did he happen to mention his gambling debts as well?" I asked calmly. The advisor's shocked expression confirmed that Thomas had compartmentalized his deception, showing different faces to different people in his life. Alexandra also suggested contacting Thomas's company HR department regarding potential misuse of company resources for his affair. "If he's been claiming business expense reimbursements for trips that were actually personal, that's fraud," she explained. "It gives us additional leverage and ensures his company is aware of potential liability issues." The conversation with HR was brief but enlightening. Without revealing the full situation, I inquired about Thomas's travel schedule for the past year, explaining that I was planning a surprise anniversary trip and wanted to avoid conflicts with his work travel. The representative confirmed that according to their records, Thomas had taken minimal business trips in the past year, none international, and was currently on personal vacation time. With Samantha's help, I documented Thomas's activities in Paris through time-stamped photos and observations. She reported that he and Audrey had visited more real estate offices and had dinner with another couple appearing to celebrate something significant. "He gave her a ring," Samantha confirmed during our latest call. "She's wearing it on her left hand. Diamond sizable. They were toasting with the other couple." The final piece of my strategic response was perhaps the most difficult: building a support system. I reached out to several close friends, people I trusted implicitly, and shared the bare outlines of what was happening. Their shock and outrage on my behalf provided emotional reinforcement I desperately needed. My friend Diane insisted I stay with her for a few days. "You shouldn't be alone in that house with all those memories," she said. "Come stay with me, clear your head." I accepted packing enough clothes for a week and the essential evidence I'd gathered. Being away from the house helped me gain perspective and prepare for the confrontation to come. I also began therapy sessions with Dr. Marlene Kovacs, a psychologist specializing in betrayal trauma. "What you're experiencing is similar to PTSD," she explained during our first session. "The person you trusted most has violated that trust in the most fundamental way. It's not just about the affair, but about the systematic deception that's forcing you to question your entire reality." Those sessions became crucial to maintaining my sanity as I processed waves of grief, rage, and humiliation. Dr. Kovacs helped me understand that Thomas's behavior reflected his character flaws, not my worth or value. "You didn't miss the signs because you're naive," she said firmly. "You missed them because you're a trusting person who expects others to operate with the same integrity you do. That's not a weakness. It's a strength that's been exploited." By the time Thomas was scheduled to return from his Chicago trip, I had transformed from a devastated wife to a woman with a plan. Alexandra had prepared divorce papers. Linda had compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence. Samantha had returned from Paris with additional documentation. And I had rehearsed exactly what I would say when I confronted the stranger I had married. The pieces were in place for a confrontation that would leave Thomas with nowhere to hide and no way to manipulate me further. I returned to our house the night before his scheduled return, sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't bear to lie in our marital bed. In the morning, I prepared for the performance of my life, one final act in a marriage that had turned out to be built entirely on fiction. After an emotionally grueling week of discovery, the day of confrontation arrived. I positioned myself in our living room, surrounded by evidence of Thomas's betrayal arranged meticulously on the coffee table, financial documents, photographs, emails, the secret phone property agreements, and Alexandra's business card placed prominently in the center. The divorce papers waited in a manila envelope beside my chair. At precisely 2:15 p.m., I heard Thomas's key in the lock. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my spine and placed my hands calmly in my lap, the picture of composure despite the hurricane of emotions whirling inside me. Thomas entered with his overnight bag, his face relaxed and slightly tanned from the Paris sun, not the overcast Chicago weather he'd claimed to be experiencing during our brief phone calls. His smile faltered when he saw me sitting formally in the living room, clearly not the warm welcome he expected. "Noelle, is everything okay?" He set down his bag, confusion crossing his features as he noticed the papers on the coffee table. "How was Chicago?" I asked, my voice calm and measured. "Productive. Back-to-back meetings, but we closed the Johnson deal." The lies continued to flow effortlessly. He loosened his tie, moving toward me for a welcome home kiss. I held up my hand, stopping him. "That's interesting because I spoke with your office. You weren't in Chicago. You haven't been on a business trip in months." His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flash of panic quickly masked by confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I was in Chicago. Who told you otherwise?" "You weren't in Chicago, Thomas." I gestured to the evidence spread before me. "You were in Paris, with Audrey." The color drained from his face as his eyes darted to the materials on the coffee table, recognizing the secret phone, the offshore account statements, the Parisian apartment lease. For a moment, he seemed frozen, calculating his options. "I can explain," he finally said, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used with difficult clients. "This isn't what it looks like." "Please," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Explain how you were simultaneously in Chicago for business meetings and in Paris shopping for engagement rings with your French girlfriend. I'm fascinated to hear the logistics of that particular feat." Thomas sank into the chair, his facade crumbling as he realized the extent of what I knew. How did you find out? Would you believe my sister was the pilot on your flight to Paris? His head snapped up, eyes widening with shock. Samantha, she was... His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. She saw me boarding. She saw everything. She called me while you were still upstairs pretending to pack for Chicago. You were simultaneously in our house and boarding a flight to Paris. So, either you've mastered the art of bilocation, or you've been living an exceptionally elaborate double life. Thomas ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it sent a pang through my chest. This was still the man I'd loved for a decade, whose habits and mannerisms were as familiar to me as my own. But now I recognized it as a stress response, not the endearing quirk I'd once thought. It wasn't planned. He began the first line of what I knew would be an intricate web of half-truths and manipulations. I met Audrey at a gallery opening 2 years ago. It was just conversation at first, then emails. I never intended... 2 years, I repeated. You've been living a double life for 2 years. That requires quite a bit of planning, Thomas. The separate phone, the offshore accounts, the apartment lease, the systematic financial deception. None of that happens by accident. He attempted to pivot. I know this looks bad, but I was confused. Unhappy. You and I, we grew apart. You were always so focused on your career, your authors. No, I cut him off sharply. You don't get to rewrite our marriage to justify your choices. I have copies of your emails to Audrey where you describe exactly how happy and unsuspecting I was. How absorbed in my books you said. How convenient my trust was for your deception. His expression hardened. You went through my emails, my phone. That's an invasion of privacy. The absurdity of his indignation almost made me laugh. Privacy? You forfeited any right to privacy when you started using our marriage as a cover for your affair. When you began siphoning our joint savings to fund your Parisian love nest. It's not that simple, Thomas insisted, switching tactics. Audrey and I have a connection that you and I lost years ago. Can you honestly say you've been happy that our marriage has been fulfilling? I looked at him directly, seeing the manipulator behind the mask of the man I'd loved. Yes, Thomas. I was genuinely happy in our marriage. I trusted you completely. I believed we had something special, something real. That was my mistake. We can fix this, he said, leaning forward earnestly. I'll end things with Audrey. We can go to counseling. Start fresh. I made a terrible mistake, but I don't want to throw away 8 years of marriage. Interesting timing for that revelation. Is it because Audrey doesn't know you're still married? Because my sister overheard quite a celebration about your engagement? Or is it because you've realized I've discovered your financial maneuvers and you're about to lose control of the narrative? Thomas's face contorted with frustration. You're being paranoid. Yes, I had an affair. I made a mistake. But these financial accusations are overblown. We can work through this if you're willing to be reasonable. Reasonable. The word triggered the first crack in my composed facade. Was it reasonable to maintain 2 separate lives, to plan a divorce that would leave me with crumbs while you started over with your French girlfriend, to lie to my face every single day for years? You're blowing this out of proportion, Thomas said dismissively. If you'd paid more attention to our marriage instead of your career, maybe I wouldn't have looked elsewhere. The blame shifting was so predictable it almost felt scripted. My career that supported us while you gambled away investments, my career that gave you the perfect cover for your absences, that career... His eyes narrowed. What do you know about my investments? Everything. I replied simply. Linda is very thorough. Who the hell is Linda? My private investigator. She found your gambling debts, Thomas. The risky investments. The money you've been moving between accounts. Did you really think you could hide all of that? Thomas stood abruptly pacing the room as his calculated charm gave way to agitation. This is ridiculous. You had no right to investigate me like a criminal. And you had no right to betray every promise you ever made to me, to plan to discard me once you'd secured your new life, to make me question every memory, every moment of the past decade. He stopped pacing, his expression softening into practiced contrition. Noelle, please. I know I've hurt you terribly, but we can get past this. Go to counseling. Rebuild. I still care about you. For the briefest moment, I felt the pull of his familiar manipulation, the desire to believe him to salvage what we had. Then I remembered the photos of him and Audrey, the ring, the apartment, the systematic deception, and my resolve hardened. There's nothing to rebuild, Thomas. You destroyed it all, piece by piece, lie by lie. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Thomas looked startled. Who's that? My support team, I said, rising to answer it. Samantha entered first, her pilot's uniform lending her an air of authority. Behind her came Alexandra, my divorce attorney, carrying her briefcase. Thomas's face paled as he recognized the implications of a lawyer's presence. Thomas, I said formally, you remember my sister Samantha, and this is Alexandra Winters, my attorney. Your attorney? He sputtered. You can't be serious. We need to discuss this privately as a couple. We are not a couple, I said clearly. We are two people at the end of a marriage based on lies. Alexandra has prepared divorce papers reflecting the evidence of your infidelity and financial deception. Alexandra stepped forward, professional and direct. Mr. Wilson, given the extensive documentation of your attempts to hide marital assets and your ongoing infidelity, my client is in an extremely advantageous position legally. I suggest you contact your own attorney immediately. Thomas looked from Alexandra to me, then to Samantha, whose identical resemblance to me seemed to disturb him deeply in that moment. This is an ambush, he said bitterly. No, I corrected him. This is consequence. This is reality. Something you've been avoiding for years. I picked up the manila envelope and extended it toward him. These are the divorce papers. Alexandra has already filed emergency motions to freeze the accounts we've identified. There will be a forensic accounting of all marital assets, including those you've attempted to conceal offshore. Thomas didn't take the envelope. Instead, his expression hardened into something ugly and unfamiliar. You'll regret this. No one will believe you. I'll fight this every step of the way. I thought you might say that, I replied calmly, which is why everything is documented. Your affair, your financial deception, your plans to leave me once you'd secured your assets. The evidence is overwhelming, Thomas. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in his eyes as he realized the extent of his exposure. His carefully constructed dual life was collapsing, each deception now laid bare. Get out of our house, Thomas, I said quietly. You can collect your personal belongings when my attorney arranges it. The locks have been changed. You can't throw me out of my own house, he protested. Alexandra stepped forward. Actually, she can. We have documentation of abandonment as you've been living part-time in Paris for months. The court has granted temporary exclusive use of the marital home to my client. Thomas looked around wildly as if searching for an escape route from the truth closing in around him. In that moment, I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the charming, attentive man I'd married, but a narcissist who'd used our marriage as a convenient cover while he built another life. It's over, Thomas, I said with finality. Your perfect plan failed. Your secret life is secret no more, and now you get to experience the consequences of your choices." As Thomas was escorted out by Samantha, taking only his overnight bag with him, I felt a curious lightness. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned, yet nothing had gone according to my life's plan. My marriage was over, my future uncertain. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the crushing weight of deception pressing on my chest. The man I had loved was a stranger. The life I had built was a mirage. But the truth, however painful, was finally mine to own. 6 months after discovering Thomas's betrayal, I stood in my new condo overlooking Boston Harbor, watching sailboats navigate the choppy spring waters. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, largely on my terms thanks to Alexandra's skillful litigation and the mountain of evidence we'd compiled. The court had not looked kindly on Thomas's attempts to hide assets or his documented plans to leave me financially vulnerable. The judge awarded me the Boston house, which I'd chosen to sell 60% of our joint assets, including those Thomas had attempted to conceal, and substantial alimony given the length of our marriage and the documented deception. "You're among the lucky ones," Alexandra had told me after the final hearing. "Most people don't discover their spouse's infidelity with such comprehensive evidence. The financial paper trail Linda uncovered was particularly damning." The process hadn't been easy. Thomas had initially hired an aggressive attorney and attempted to paint me as an unstable, jealous wife who had invaded his privacy and fabricated evidence. But faced with testimony from Samantha, documentation from Linda, and the financial records Alexandra had subpoenaed, his case rapidly disintegrated. Most satisfying was the moment when Thomas's attorney, after reviewing the evidence during discovery, took his client aside for a harsh reality check. I overheard snippets: "Impossible position," "No jury would sympathize," and "Take the settlement offer." Thomas's face had been ashen when he agreed to Alexandra's terms. My healing journey had been neither quick nor linear. In the weeks following the confrontation, I'd cycled through rage, paralyzing grief, and occasional moments of desperate longing for the marriage I thought I'd had. Dr. Kovac's therapy sessions became my lifeline as I processed what psychologists called post-betrayal syndrome. "Your brain is trying to reconcile two conflicting realities," she explained during a particularly difficult session. "The Thomas you thought you knew and loved, and the Thomas who systematically deceived you. This cognitive dissonance is profoundly destabilizing." I joined a support group for betrayed spouses, finding solace in the shared experiences of others who understood the unique pain of discovering a double life. Through their stories and my own introspection, I began to recognize subtle red flags I'd missed or dismissed during my marriage. Thomas's insistence on handling all financial matters, which I'd interpreted as helpfulness. His careful management of his phone, always kept face-down passcode protected. The gradual isolation from certain friends who might have noticed discrepancies in his stories. The emotional distance disguised as work stress during periods when I now knew he'd been with Audrey. Reconnecting with friends became an unexpected source of healing. I realized Thomas had subtly discouraged certain friendships, particularly with people who might have questioned his absences or inconsistencies. My college roommate Jessica, who worked in international finance and might have recognized his fabricated business trips. My cousin Michael, whose direct questioning style might have penetrated Thomas's careful facades. "I never liked him," Jessica admitted when we reunited for lunch, her frankness both painful and refreshing. "There was something performative about his charm, but you seemed happy, so I kept my doubts to myself." My career became another anchor during the turbulent months of divorce proceedings. My publishing house had been understanding of my situation, offering flexibility when court appearances and legal meetings interrupted my work schedule. Ironically, the distraction of manuscript deadlines and author communications provided normalcy when everything else felt chaotic. 3 months after the separation, I was promoted to senior editor with responsibility for expanding our young adult fiction division. The increased demands of the role proved therapeutic, channeling my energy into creative work rather than ruminating on betrayal. Dating again felt impossible at first. The thought of trusting another person with my heart seemed as likely as willingly putting my hand in a fire after being severely burned. But eventually, cautiously, I accepted a dinner invitation from Daniel, a literature professor I'd met at a publishing event. "We'll take it slow," he said when I explained my recent history. "No pressure, no expectations. Just conversation and pasta." That first date led to a second, then a third. Daniel's patience and transparency were balms to my suspicious heart. He shared his own past relationship failures with refreshing honesty. When he said he'd call, he called. When he was running late, he texted. Small acts of reliability that gradually rebuilt my capacity for trust. Perhaps the most surprising development came 4 months after the confrontation when I received an email from an unfamiliar address, Audrey Beaumont. "I believe we need to talk," she wrote in careful English. "I have learned things about Thomas that you should know, and I suspect you have information that would be valuable to me as well." Against Alexandra's advice, I agreed to a video call, curiosity overcoming caution. Audrey appeared on my screen, younger than I'd expected, with intelligent eyes and a guarded expression. "He told me you were divorced," she said without preamble. "That you had separated 3 years ago but maintained appearances for family reasons. That the divorce was nearly final." "We were very much married," I replied. "Happily, I thought, until I discovered his Parisian life." What followed was 2 hours of comparing notes, piecing together a more complete picture of Thomas's deception. Audrey had believed she was the only woman in his life, just as I had. He had presented himself to her as a soon-to-be divorced financial consultant with international clients. The apartment they'd selected was to be their primary home, with his Boston property maintained for business purposes. "The engagement was real," she confirmed, holding up her left hand where the diamond still sparkled. "But after your sister identified him on the plane, everything unraveled. He tried to explain it away, claiming Samantha was mistaken, that she'd seen someone who looked like him, but too many inconsistencies had emerged." "Did he mention the gambling?" I asked. Her sharp intake of breath answered before her words did. "What gambling?" I shared the financial discoveries Linda had uncovered, watching Audrey's expression shift from shock to anger as she realized the depth of Thomas's deception extended to their financial future as well. "I invested in property with him," she said quietly. "My family money." By the end of our conversation, an unlikely alliance had formed. We agreed to share any additional information that might emerge, both of us determined to reclaim what Thomas had taken from us, not just financially, but emotionally. "We are not victims," Audrey said firmly before we disconnected. "We are survivors of the same predator." Thomas's professional downfall came shortly after our divorce was finalized. The evidence of financial impropriety that Linda had uncovered extended to his workplace. Anonymous tips to his firm's compliance department triggered an internal investigation, revealing that Thomas had been fabricating client meetings to cover his trips to Paris and misusing company resources. He was terminated with cause, his professional reputation in tatters. The last I heard, he had moved to Chicago, ironically, the city he'd used as cover for so many of his deceptions, starting over with neither Audrey nor me by his side. As I unpacked books in my new Harbor View condo, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. The danger of blind trust, the importance of financial independence even within marriage, the value of instincts I'd ignored when something felt wrong, the necessity of a support system separate from one's spouse. The most painful lesson was recognizing how I'd abdicated responsibility for important aspects of my life, allowing Thomas to handle finances, social connections, and future planning while I focused on my career and our day-to-day happiness. Never again would I surrender my autonomy so completely to another person, no matter how trustworthy they seemed. Yet amid these hard truths, I found unexpected gifts. A deeper relationship with Samantha, whose timely call had saved me from potentially years more deception. New friendships forged in the crucible of crisis. Professional growth that might never have occurred had I remained in my comfortable marriage. And most importantly, a stronger sense of self tempered by betrayal, but not broken by it. I still had moments of rage when I thought about the years wasted on a man who had never truly existed. Nights when I woke up reaching for someone who had been an illusion. Days when bitterness threatened to overtake gratitude. But these moments grew less frequent, less intense as time passed and new experiences accumulated. Forgiveness remained complicated. Not for Thomas, I had realized in therapy, but for myself. Forgiving my own naivety, my willingness to ignore subtle signs, my complete surrender to the fairy tale of perfect love. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened, Dr. Kovacs had explained. It's about releasing its power over your future. Standing at my new living room window, watching the play of light on water, I felt that release beginning. The story of my marriage would always be part of me, but it would not define what came next. That blank page belonged to me alone, to fill with wisdom hard-won and possibilities I was only beginning to imagine. True security, I had learned, never comes from another person, no matter how convincing their promises. It comes from within, from knowing that whatever storms arise, you have the strength to weather them. From understanding that while trust can be broken, the capacity to trust again, wisely and carefully, remains intact. For everyone listening to my story, I hope you'll take away this truth: loving deeply is never a mistake, but loving blindly can be. Pay attention to discrepancies, maintain your independence, and remember that real love thrives in transparency, not secrecy. Has anyone else discovered a partner's betrayal in an unexpected way? Share your story in the comments. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more experiences that remind us we're never alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember, the end of one chapter is always the beginning of another.